There's a very interesting report in The Nation about the DNC hack that many in the intelligence community have attributed to Russians, to the Russian government. Now, you guys know I've been skeptical of the hacking charges, especially when it comes to when they claim, oh, well, did Russia hack the voting machines? No, there's no evidence of that. Did the Russian hackers hack into the DNC? Again, I'm very skeptical of that, and I'm going to show you why. Now, what I did believe Russia did is that I believe that they tried to influence the election by running propaganda. And, of course, paying bots, you know, the troll army, a lot like what the Correct a Record troll army also did, in order to spread negative information about Hillary Clinton, which is something I think a lot of countries do, including the United States, in order to influence elections. If you think we haven't tried to influence other elections, well, obviously you're not paying attention. Of course we try to influence elections. We even overthrow other countries, the leaders of other countries, and install puppet governments. So we've done all that. Now, this new report from former NSA experts and others who are not named, and I'm going to tell you that because I think that you should take this with a grain of salt. But nonetheless, if these allegations are true, what's in this report, it actually threatens to obliterate the DNC talking point of Russian hacking into the DNC. Now, this comes from Patrick Lawrence of The Nation. Now, he writes that forensic investigators, intelligence analysts, systems designers, program architects, and computer scientists of long experience and strongly credentialed are now producing evidence they say disproves the official version of key events last year, and that is, of course, that Russia hacked the DNC. Now, he says their work is intricate and continues right now at a frenetic pace, but its certain results so far are too simply stated and freighted with implications. Now, what are those implications? One being that there was no hack of the Democratic National Committee system on July 5th. Not by the Russians and not by anyone else. But now, wait a minute. Well, if there was no hacking, well, then how did the information go from the DNC to WikiLeaks? Well, that's the other part of this, is that they're claiming that science demonstrates that instead of it being a hack, that it was actually a leak downloaded locally with a memory stick or a similar data storage device. So basically, they're saying this, we believe we have evidence that this was an inside job, that these emails were taken by an insider. Now, if it's an insider, then by definition, it cannot be a hack. So now let's look at some of the evidence that they're saying, because look, there's a lot there. Now, Lawrence writes, qualified experts working independently of one another had begun to examine the DNC case immediately after the July 2016 events. Prominent among these is a group comprising former intelligence officers, almost all of whom previously occupied senior positions. Very interesting. Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, that's the group, was founded back in 2003. They now have 30 members, including a few associates with backgrounds in national security fields other than intelligence. So basically, they're saying, look, we've got a lot of experts, and we've been looking at any possible data to corroborate whether or not the Russians did hack the DNC, or if it was someone else, if it was an insider. Well, that's very interesting. Now, who are these people? Well, the chief researchers active on the DNC case are William Binney, formerly the NSA's technical director for world geopolitical and military analysis, and designer of many agency programs now in use. So that guy already, that's not some heavy credentials. Now you also have Kirk Wiebe, formerly a senior analyst at the NSA's SIGINT Automation Research Center. Edward Loomis, formerly technical director of the in the NSA's Office of Signal Processing, and Ray McGovern, an intelligence analyst for nearly 3 decades and formerly chief of the CIA's Soviet Foreign Policy Branch. Now, Lawrence explains that most of these men have decades of experience in matters concerning Russian intelligence and their related technologies. So, look, if you were to turn to outside analysts, these are the people that you would turn to determine whether or not Russians had breached the DNC and stolen those emails, or if it were someone else. So, What do they believe happened? They have all argued that the hack theory is wrong and that instead it was a locally executed leak. They say that that is the far more likely explanation, so that basically they believe somebody put a data stick inside of the server and downloaded all these emails and then, ran off with it and gave it to WikiLeaks. So that's what they believe. Now, again, getting a little bit more technical, but not too technical, as this is somewhat unfamiliar to me, and of course I'm going to be honest about that. I don't really know the intricacies of how to do this kind of thing, but they say that they worked with someone they called the forensicator. Now, this is somebody who is not identified. We do not know who that is, so take that into consideration. They are an anonymous person with an anonymous name. Now, working with this guy, that team, or guy or girl, it could be either. Again, we don't know who this person is. We only know that they are located somewhere in the West Coast. Now, they found something very interesting. Now, they said that with data they received from multiple independent investigators who have also been looking into this case and loose collaborations, they believe that the DNC emails were downloaded locally. And they believe so because they think that they have found something called evidence of this through what they call transfer rate. Now, the metadata that they've said that they had gathered established that on the evening of July 5th, 2016, 1,976 megabytes of data were downloaded from the DNC server. The operation took 87 seconds. Now, this yields a transfer rate of 22.7 megabytes per second. Now, look, I read through the article, I read through the comments, and there were a lot of people that were getting megabits and megabytes confused. So when you're reading this story and you're like, oh, I've got 100 gigabit memory, right, or 100 gigabit transfer rate right now, so you're obviously wrong. No, they're different measurements. So what they're saying in the study is that they're saying that, look, that is too fast. We don't actually have servers that can do that fast. We don't have the internet infrastructure to have 22.7 megabytes per second, especially if it's coming from either Romania or Russia. So that's the crux of their argument. That's why they're saying that this transfer rate is too fast for a hack, but it is fast enough for a local connection. And again, the farther you get away from the server, the more that data degrades, and of course, the less fast that data will transfer. So again, that is the crux of their argument, and it's a very compelling one. In fact, they said that no internet service provider, such as a hacker would have had to use in mid-2016, was capable of downloading data at this speed. Now, look, I pay for 100 gigabit internet service, right? My downloads are 4 megabytes at most. I actually pay for pretty expensive cable. So that's just to show you, 22 is really difficult to get to when it comes to actual download speed. So we're talking about bandwidth here, okay? Now, timestamps in the metadata also include that the download occurred somewhere on the east coast of the United States, not Russia, Romania, or anyone else outside the eastern zone. Timestamps recording the download also indicate that it occurred in the Eastern Daylight Time Zone at approximately, as I said, 6:45. So this is, again, if this data can be verified, well, that would be very interesting. That would, of course, blow apart the entire Russian hacking narrative. So, but the problem is, and my question, of course, is, can we verify this? Is there a way we can verify the information, if we can verify the metadata that they gathered? And of course, that would be a very interesting question to do. And it was something that I would definitely want to see. Now, combined with the forensicator's finding on the transfer rate, the timestamps add to the theory that the download was conducted locally. But wait a minute. You might be thinking, but yeah, don't we have this entire trail leading to Russia? For example, the fact that when they copied these files and pasted them into a Word document, Well, that Word document was all in Russian, so they transferred all the emails and translated them into Russian. So it's got to be the Russians, right? Well, not necessarily, although that is a possibility. One investigator believes that the metadata was deliberately altered and documents were deliberately pasted into that Word document with Russian language settings and style headings. Now, if you were an insider and you stole this DNC data, why would you do that? Well, I think the obvious answer is to cover your fucking ass. I mean, think about it. If you're a DNC insider and you decide, hey, I want to steal data and then leak it out to WikiLeaks later, well, you would want to cover your ass. You would want to make sure that it looked like it didn't come from you. That makes sense, right? Especially since the Obama administration is not exactly soft on leakers. And not only that, but what you're doing is actually an illegal act. So, of course, you would want to cover your ass. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, who's the leaker? It must be Seth Rich. No. Look, let me tell you, I'm going to be super honest. I do not buy the Seth Rich conspiracy theory. I actually do think that whoever killed Seth Rich intended to rob him, got spooked because this robbery, it went wrong. And I'm not going to really get into that. Okay, but again, I'm not buying the Seth Rich conspiracy stuff. Okay. Now, I'm also skeptical of the Russian narrative, but I'm also skeptical of this. I'm skeptical of fucking everything at this point because, look, I don't trust anybody. And so what I want to do is I want to see evidence and I want to see verification. There's a lot of information that we don't have. And there's a lot of information that we might never have. And again, some of the people looking into this on this team that have found these findings, they're anonymous. So again, it's anonymous and you can't really see the data in front of us. So again, I'm skeptical of this, but still, nonetheless, this is very interesting. And also, it's a possibility. I think it's something definitely worth investigating, looking into. Now, again, more of my questions here. If it was a DNC insider, what are the motivations? And if it was an insider, then again, why try to blame it on the Russians or Guccifer 2.0? Why not blame it on the Chinese or some other group? Is it because the Russian government already showed some sort of interest in penetrating U.S. systems? So they thought maybe it could be a good cover? I don't know. I'm asking questions. There are so many unknown questions here. So, but on that, right? Were the Russians interested in our elections? I actually believe that yes, of course. Why do I say that? It's not because the Russians are uniquely evil in that way. It's because all other foreign countries are interested in our elections. It turns out our elections are very impactful because they deal with things like foreign policy. What America does is really important to the world stage. So, of course, they're going to be interested. And it's sort of up to us in order to make sure that they can't penetrate our systems. But is there any evidence that the Russians hacked into our voting machines? No. Did they spearfish the DNC and use that to get access into Podesta's emails, as our intelligence agencies think? I'm not sure. I don't really know. I don't really have the answers. There are far too many questions for both theories. What this report says, though, is that there are some computer and intelligence experts that think that there was a different way that WikiLeaks got a hold of Podesta emails, and that's, of course, through an insider. Now, who that alleged leaker is, we'll likely never know. And again, I'm not interested in talking about the Seth Rich story. That has already been debunked by the lawyer himself, and even Fox News had to retract that story. So, no, I don't believe that he was the leaker. I don't believe that he was murdered by the DNC, by the Clintons for it. Again, I think that's ridiculous, personally. Look, and especially because if he was the leaker and it made it look like the Russians did it, well, then how would they actually know that it was him that actually leaked the information? If he had covered his tracks when he leaked it to WikiLeaks to make it look like the Russians, then how would the people know that he stole the information? Wouldn't they just go after the Russians? Again, this whole thing falls apart, okay? And it doesn't make any sense. And I actually think that Seth Rich, that this information that has recently come out, if this is true, it actually hurts the Seth Rich conspiracy. But that's, again, the way that I see it. But I'm saying I'm very, very skeptical, and you guys should be skeptical too of all the stuff that comes out. Ask questions, look at the evidence, and if what we have here is true, then the investigation could be a huge game changer. Now, what this does not mean is that that Trump doesn't have any financial deals with Russia. I also don't believe that Russia is an innocent party in trying to influence our elections. As I just said before, I believe they did do propaganda. I do believe they also did the correct the record thing and paid lots of trolls and bots in order to spread negative information about Hillary Clinton. But what this does mean, if this is true, is that in this case, the entire DNC, Russia hacking the DNC narrative is not true. And I'm going to add that personally, I believe it is far more believable that Hillary Clinton lost because she ran a bad campaign. That bad campaign didn't excite a lot of people, but she was also a victim of massive voter suppression, as well as, of course, a victim of the outdated institution of the Electoral College, which for the second time in the last 2 decades did end up robbing the majority of Americans their choice in president. Now, it's also believable that, again, Russian propaganda and social media bots might have swayed a few voters that were low information and on the fence towards voting for Donald Trump, which, if true, and if brokered between Trump and Putin, would have been illegal, as you cannot accept foreign help, which would be considered a campaign contribution from a foreign government. So all that, there's so many caveats. This is such a complicated story, and I'm tired of people boiling it down to, one of two things. When this is incredibly complicated, the entire thing. Nonetheless, I'm going to be labeled a Russian bot. But seriously, though, on all of this, on everything, and the entire thing, there are things that need to be questioned and things that need to be verified. And if this is true, this is a very interesting piece of evidence that could change the entire conversation surrounding this last election. And I think it needs to be looked into, and I think it needs to be definitely investigated and definitely considered. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.